So we have a pretty interesting next few weeks on the market, both from a technical standpoint, but also from a macroeconomic standpoint. We're going to go ahead and review that today on the market. We're going to take a look at the S&P 500 because I think right now this is the most important chart to be looking at. The /ES futures. We'll also take a look at the SPY ETF. Some very important technical levels to be watching this week, into the end of the week, and also into next week where we're going to be having CPI data, which could really be the major catalyst on this market. A lot to look at today on the technical standpoint. Let's go ahead and jump right into it right now. So guys, I don't think it comes by any surprise that the market is rejecting the long-term downtrend that started from the beginning of this year. I think every single person that trades in the market is aware of this level. I think a lot of people have been watching this level, and the last 3 days of trading, we have seen that rejection start to come in. Now, that rejection starting to come in has came down to some very interesting levels here and some levels that we need to be aware of. You don't want to be late to this move. You don't want to be early to this move. You want to make sure that you are sort of focused on the entire picture here. And in today's video, I want to give you a good idea of what levels I am watching into the end of this week and into next week. So here on the S&P 500 futures, we can clearly see the rejection that came in near that 200 SMA and also near that long-term downtrend. We got a little pop over that 200 SMA, which probably faked some people out, and we got to push into that long-term downtrend. You can see that long-term downtrend, if I zoom out, has been alive since the beginning of this year. One test here, two tests here, the third test here, and once again, over the last 4 trading days, we tested it here on the 30th, we rejected it on the 1st, came back down on the 2nd, the 5th, and the 6th. Today, we saw another downside move off that long-term downtrend. Now, this move has came right back down into the previous support area and the previous rejection level around 39.20. This level also has the 100 SMA sitting there, and it acted as support today on the shorter term analysis. What we also have sitting here is if we draw a trend line from the lows here, you can see that we also have a short-term uptrend that is still there acting as a potential support. So if we draw our uptrend here, you can see that we are still potentially above this uptrend. Now, this uptrend is up for some debate. I like to draw it from this level here. I think this is the more important level around this 35.90. Some people I have seen are drawing it from the 3,500 low. If you draw it from the 3,500 low, you can see today we potentially cracked that uptrend. So that uptrend is up for a little bit of debate depending on how you draw it. I've been drawing it from this low here. I think this is more of a substantial low around this 35.90, 3,600. If you draw it from that level, you basically tapped it today, and that is where you found support come in. So I do like this 39.20 area as a watch into the rest of the week. You guys can see if I break this down to the 4-hour chart, this 39.20 level is a previous support. It's a rejection, or it's a previous rejection. It's a support here at the 100 SMA, and it has shown a slight amount of support at end of day today. By no means does that mean that this level holds as a support level, but what this level could act as is a short-term support that could fake some people out of some put options. Maybe into end of week, we could get a little bit of a short-term bounce off this level. If you are late to shorting this market, if you potentially shorted here around this 39.20 and 100 SMA, they may try to do some interesting bounce off this level and maybe then send it back down this uptrend. So just be careful if you are shorting this market. Be careful around this 39.20. You have the previous rejection here. You have a support here. You have a support again that came in end of day, and you have the 100 SMA. The way I drew the uptrend, you have a potential uptrend there as well. If we go ahead and we extend this uptrend, you can see we have the potential of an uptrend hold at that 39.20 area as well. So coming into tomorrow, coming into end of week, keep an eye on this 39.20 area, this 100 SMA. This could act as some type of short-term demand, could act as some type of short-term maybe dead cat bounce, which will take people out of short-term puts. So you don't want to get too aggressive here until we potentially see, in my opinion, a break of this short-term uptrend and a break of this previous 39.20 area. Now, if we get this breakdown, if we do break this short-term uptrend, if we come back and turn this area as a rejection, I think this is the area that you can get aggressive on your puts, and I don't see much support here, likely down until this 3,700, 3,770. right in this general area. I think this is around the area you will see this market come back down to. This is where we previously channeled between this 3770 and this 3920 area. You had a lot of chop in between this area here, about a 200-point range. If you break down back into this previous channel on the left side of your screen, I think you could see that extended move to the downside, breaking the 100 SMA, breaking the short-term uptrend, and breaking this previous level, this previous rejection, and this support right here. Now, if we zoom out on this chart, we can really see that this is somewhat of a wedge that is forming, and when you get a wedge, there is typically a pretty big move that follows after the break of either the short-term uptrend or the longer-term downtrend here, and that I think is what we're heading into. If we get some type of short-term bounce off that 3920 level that we talked about, we could start to see a little bit of chop in this area before CPI. I think that is also a very possible outcome, that the move, the bigger move, either through the long-term uptrend or through the short-term downtrend, it's possible that we don't see that larger move until we get the catalyst on CPI. So is it possible that the market sort of chops here in between this wedge, and then on CPI, which is next week, we get the move either through the uptrend or we get the move through the downtrend? That is also a very possible outcome in my opinion, and if that happens, just be cautious getting too aggressive in this area. If we continue to chop this week, if we don't get a clear move, maybe by end of week, in my opinion, the market's going to chop until it gets that big catalyst, which in my opinion is going to be CPI next week. So overall, what to watch into end of week and what to watch into the next week is this 3920 area on the S&P 500, the 100 SMA on the daily chart, which you guys can see if I go to the 5-minute chart, you can see it acted as a somewhat of a short-term support today. I wouldn't say that is 100% valid, but it is definitely there and something to watch out for. It has previously held that right here, which was a previous rejection back in late October. So you guys can see that we did previously hold that 100 SMA at 3920, and we bounced off of that level today. Be careful of any type of short-term demand bounce off that level if you get a little bit aggressive on the put side. I would wait to see if this short-term uptrend breaks. I would wait to see if we turn this 3920 into a rejection. And if we get that, then I think you have a little bit more confirmation to the downside here. To the upside, I would be very cautious getting too aggressive to the upside, looking for bounces. You have to watch out for this 200 SMA and this long-term downtrend that is still very alive, and it is definitely a rejection point on this market. And finally, the last thing that I noted, the last thing to consider, be careful of potentially some chop in between this range, in between this wedge. We still have a few more days potentially here. CPI is on the 13th, which is right around here. So if I put a date line, the 13th is right here, right? So this is the 13th. This is when CPI comes out. Do we see some chop until the 13th of next week? And then on the 13th, do we get the move? That is another thing that I would consider. Be careful getting too aggressive directionally until maybe we have to wait until that CPI catalyst on the 13th of December. So I also wanted to go ahead and include the SPY ETF. I know a lot of you guys like to watch the SPY ETF. It is the exact same analysis, but I will give the levels here for the SPY. So you can see it's the same thing, right? The long-term downtrend, the 200 SMA rejection that did come in this week. You can see this is where we previously rejected and had that leg lower. Right now, you can see that short-term uptrend. This is how I'm drawing it. Some people are drawing it from these lows. If you draw it from those lows, you could potentially say that we broke that short-term uptrend today. That is something that we'll have to see how that works out. If you do draw it from those exact lows, the extreme lows here from 348 on the SPY, if you match it up to these lows right here and you match it up to this support here, you can see today we did break that short-term uptrend. Again, that is up to discussion on how you draw that uptrend. I am ignoring this extreme low, and I am drawing it from the base here from around 356 on the SPY. I'm drawing it up, and you can see that if you draw it that way, that could potentially be where we found some support off of that short-term uptrend today on the SPY ETF. If we zoom in on this SPY ETF, you can see that we had the previous high and previous lows around this 390 level, and this is the same as that 3900 level or the 3920 level that I pointed out on the ES. So if I go to the ES, you can see that 3920 area on the ES, previous highs into support, 100 SMA. That is the same exact thing as 390 on the SPY. You can see the previous highs here, the previous support at the 100, and again the support that came in near that 390 level and the 100 SMA today. If I go down to the 5-minute chart, here is the 100 SMA on the SPY. You can see it pretty much held it perfectly today. So I think that 100 SMA is something to watch out for moving into the rest of this week. So back on the 4-hour chart here on the SPY, here's what I'd watch. 390 on the SPY I think is a major level here. If you get a break below 390, if you turn it into a rejection, I think that is your confirmation for downside. That would be a break of this key level. That would be a break of this 100 SMA, and that would be a break of the short-term uptrend. I think a break of 390 is your confirmation for downside. If you do hold 390, if you hold this area, the 100 SMA, I could make the case for some type of short-term bounce off this area, some type of chop that comes in the rest of the week so that we wait for the catalyst, which is on December 13th. That is CPI. That could be the other option on this market. We get some type of short-term demand bounce off this previous level, off this short-term uptrend, off the 100 SMA, burn some short-term put options, chop this market for a little bit more into next week, and then we get the move on CPI next week on the 13th of December. So guys, I just want to do this quick video, give you guys some analysis, a little bit of an update on the SPY ETF and the S&P 500 futures. I think this is the most important thing to be watching for your trading. This will influence the rest of the market. We have to see how this 390 level holds on the SPY, that 100 SMA holds on the SPY and the S&P 500 futures. Does it provide some type of a short-term demand bounce? Does it burn some short-term put options? Does the market chop into next week, which is CPI? In my opinion, I think it is a little rare for the market to make such a big influential move of a big downtrend or big uptrend before a major catalyst. In my opinion, I think it would be right for the market to make that break to the upside or the downside off of a catalyst, which is next week, and that is CPI. So I'm on the side of the market chopping around for a few more days in this sort of wedge and then making that major move on CPI. We'll see what happens. This is why we trade. This is why we do analysis, so we can prepare for these moves. We can react to these moves when they happen, but we can't predict these moves. So let's make sure to pay attention to these levels on the S&P 500 futures and the SPY ETF. I hope this video helped you and gave you a good idea of what levels to watch for the rest of this week. If you enjoyed this quick analysis, press the like button, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to come to the pre-market live streams where I do this analysis every morning and help you prepare for every single trading day. Press that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.